So in this video, I'm going to be talking about symbolism in literature, something that people do look for and something that, along with themes, sometimes seems to scare students. They're afraid they're not going to see it or something like that. But quite often literature can be very well enjoyed even if you don't see the symbolism, if you don't see the symbolism, but if you're reading it just literally, but it can just bring much more enjoyment to you if you see the symbolism that authors were trying to put into their writings. So let's talk about, what do we mean by that? What is a symbol? A symbol is a person, object, or even a setting. Left the word out there. Even a setting that means more than its literal meaning. It has something deeper to it, and you don't want to let that scare you. Sometimes people get weird about that. They think that everything in literature is symbolic, or that if they don't find them correctly, they're not going to understand the story. That depends on your point of view, but you can get a lot of enjoyment out of good literature, even if you don't get every single symbol. Nobody really can get everything out of a story that the author puts into it. So what you want to do is read carefully, read thoroughly, read, a couple of times, and see what you do get out of it and enjoy what you do get out of it, and not be worrying about what you might not get out of it. Symbols are all around us all the time. There are conventional symbols that everyone recognizes. Everyone recognizes the wedding rings, what they mean. Everyone recognizes crosses. Even if you're not a Christian, you still generally know that that refers to Christianity. Everyone recognizes an American flag for what it's for. We talk about the red on the flag for blood, and what the stars represent, what the white represents. There are many, many types of symbols around us. We're used to reading symbols, so it should not be a big stretch when you're looking for symbols. Literary symbols are sometimes those conventional symbols. If they mention a flag, they may be referring to a bigger issue of patriotism. If they mention wedding rings, that could be referring to something more about that particular marriage than just the fact that they were married. So they can use conventional symbols to mean more, but they also can use symbols that are created internally by the story. For instance, in Bartleby the Scrivener, there were walls everywhere. His window looked out into a wall. He had a wall around him in the office. They talked about walls quite a bit. And then, of course, it's very clear to see when you read that story that Bartleby is very much contained in his own little world. He's lost in his own little world, like he has walls up around him. And so those are created internally by the story. You may not have recognized that the first time you read it, but the more you read it, the more you see how enclosed he is. And maybe it doesn't even come clear until someone mentions it, but then usually it'll spring immediately to mind. Oh yeah, there were walls everywhere. If you've read Wuthering Heights, as Heathcliff, some people would call him the protagonist, but one of the main characters, as he's leaving, there's a huge storm and a tree comes crashing down on the house and destroys part of the house. And this is clearly a symbol of what Heathcliff is going to do, a symbol that foreshadows the destruction that Heathcliff is going to try to bring on the houses in Wuthering Heights. If you've read or seen the movie A Raisin in the Sun, there's a house plant that they refer to constantly. And this house plant, they're always needing to water it and take care of it and put it in the sun, take it out of the sun. And as you read, it's clear that this house plant is being used kind of as a reflection of their hopes, how they have to constantly be feeding into their hopes to try for a better life, that this is necessary, and kind of the house plant reflects what's going on in their lives and their hopes for a better life. Have you thought of the golden snitch in Harry Potter stories as a symbol? Harry Potter is constantly trying to find the truth, trying to track down the truth about his parents and about um, he who shall not be named. And so some people would see the golden snitch. That's what he does, in Quidditch. He constantly chases after the golden snitch, and the game can't be won until someone catches that, chases it down. And so there are people who see symbolism there. You may or may not have, but I don't know if J.K. Rowling meant it to be there, but it can be seen that way, and that's the way that symbolism can work in a story if you're looking for it. Now, allegory is a little different than symbolism. If you've heard of allegories, in allegories, a single fixed meaning. There can't be several things that they represent. Like the golden snitch might represent Harry looking for several different things. It might not always mean the same thing in the same story. But allegories are things such as if you've had to read or enjoyed reading, as I did, Pilgrim's Progress or some things like that. There's a character named Christian, and that's exactly what he stands for. He in that story, there's a character named Evangelist, and that's exactly what he stands for. So if you're looking at an allegory, those will have very fixed and set meanings. They don't change. And that's a name like this clearly shows you. You don't have to hunt for the symbolism. You know exactly what it is, exactly what these characters represent in an allegory generally. So symbolism may not jump out at you in a first reading. That's okay. It doesn't quite often, and because often until you've gotten to the end of the story, you're not sure what the point's going to be, so these things won't appear to you the first time. Once you've read the story, then they will be more clear. As with Bartleby the Scrivener, talking about all these walls is really not clear till in the end when he ends up in prison and you find out he worked at the dead letter office and all that. Ends up in jail, I should say, more so than prison. Then those walls start to make sense, but they probably didn't the first time through. So it's okay if it doesn't jump out at you at the first time. Usually it takes more than one reading and thinking carefully about the context and the themes of the story. So if we're talking about how enclosed and how cut off from society Bartleby seemed to be, then all the walls make sense. But it was something that you have to kind of think through for it to, probably with more than one reading, to see that. Symbols in a story, unlike as we just mentioned in an allegory, can mean more than one thing. So the walls may have represented Bartleby being cut off from society. They also could represent how Wall Street itself kind of can be confining, that the financial interests there can really cut you off from natural society. It was representing to some degree how at that time people were thinking about the hustle and bustle of modern life, which we think about now, but how unnatural that might be. So there's a lot of things the walls could symbolize. They don't have to be just one particular thing. And different people might see them representing different things. Now, you should be able to enjoy a story without the symbolism. The symbolism will just make it deeper, and you will enjoy the story more as you look for the symbolism. Very few good authors can't be enjoyed just on the literal surface, but you really find that you enjoy the story more and that you get so much more from that author if you do find the symbolism. And so when you do decide that something's going to be symbolic, be sure that the text does support that reading. Don't just pick something out and think, well, I'd like that to represent whatever. I would like the walls to represent, who knows, something about prisons or something that the text won't support. So you have to ensure that the symbolic qualities you give that thing can be supported by the text. Unlike sometimes people say, well, you can interpret a story any way you want. Well, no, you can't interpret it any way you want. You have to be sure that your text will support that, and that's the same way with symbolism. You need to be sure that it will support that interpretation.